We'll start with an easy question first, Murray. Tell us your earliest memory of rugby, whether that's watching a rugby game or your first game that you ever played.
I think under sevens at St Vincent's Aranda in Canberra. Dad was a rugby league player at South Sydney, and the school played rugby union and primary school, and still got lifelong mates from that very day, and played a lot of league up until year 11. And then the principal said to my father, he's in senior school now, he's got to play rugby union, so I've been a rugby man ever since. So,
how did the dad take that?
Dad loved it. He had 3 sons and they all followed suit, so they've done pretty well out of the game.
So you kind of were forced to play rugby, but obviously after that you continued playing rugby. What was it about rugby union that you connected with?
I loved it, and obviously, you play with people you're friends with at school, and then you make rep teams, and you're playing with the people that you've traditionally played against, and then you make next level rep teams. It's rugby's it's quite unique. It's those friendships, those bonds, that morale and esprit de corps, which really define this game. And you have tussles on the paddock, but your friends off the paddock, and I think that's a wonderful thing about our game.
It's one of the unique things, yeah. And so obviously you're in Canberra, and you start playing in Canberra rep sides, is that correct?
Yeah, I went to Darramarlin College and played for ACT schoolboys and Australian schoolboys, and then after school played for the Darramarlin Rugby Club, which is now known as the Gungahlin Eagles, and had 2 seasons there, and then went to the Royal Military College, Duntroon, and rugby is obviously a bit of a religion in the military, and then a posting cycle around Australia after that. So yeah, rugby's been my game, Graham.
Absolutely. Now you were involved in the Canberra rep teams pre-Super Rugby. What was the kind of feeling, because back then Queensland, New South Wales was sort of seen as the superpowers of rugby. What was the general feeling back in Canberra?
Yeah, I was privileged in many respects. I was a Canberra boy posted back to Canberra in 1994. That year we had a narrow loss to Queensland at Manuka Oval. We beat Ireland, had a narrow loss to Western Samoa, and then for the first time in a century we beat New South Wales at Concord Oval. And the next year Canberra put a team into the Sydney comp, the Canberra Kookaburras. We got beaten by Gordon in the grand final. Australia did not so well at the Rugby World Cup that year, and some very wealthy men got involved with Super League first, and then another wealthy gentleman got involved with rugby, and Super Rugby as we know it is on the landscape, and rugby went from amateur to professional overnight, and had the great fortune of being a foundation ACT Brumby, all whilst posted back to Canberra as an army captain.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. So obviously 1996, rugby becomes professional. Australia gets an extra team, the ACT Brumbies, and it's initially made up of sort of the what the media, probably from Queensland and New South Wales, cruelly described as the discards from both Queensland and New South Wales. And it was a bit of a melting pot of local Canberra players, but also Queensland and New South Wales players. I mean, your inaugural coach, Rob McQueen, was from Sydney. Your captain, Brett Robinson, was from Queensland, my club South. How did that all blend together? Was it easy at first, or did you all just sort of bond over a common cause?
Well, I think to your previous question, New South Wales and Queensland have been the dominant states in rugby. ACT had always played the midweek international touring teams. So we weren't really taken seriously, and then I think those couple of events that we talked about earlier, one was in particular was in 95, we played Argentina at Manuka Oval, and ACT, as I said, had traditionally played the midweek teams, and this year we played the Argentinian team the Saturday before the first test, so we played against their test team, and we won quite convincingly. And there was a couple of locals in that team, you might have heard of them, called George Gregan, Marco Caputo, Joe Roth, Steve Larkin, Justin Harrison. The list goes on. Rod Kafer, and that coupled with the advent of professionalism, the discards from New South Wales and Queensland got picked up by the Brumbies, and we gelled, from day one, because it was very new for us. but B, most importantly, it gave Canberrans an opportunity to stay in Canberra to play professional rugby. So, I think over the years we may have got the balance wrong, and Canberrans may have been missed out on selection at Brumbies level. But it's a professional sport, and you need to win to be successful. So their selection policy's certainly not something to do with me, but the Brumbies have been and still are the most successful team in Australian rugby, whether people like it or not, and that's off the smell of an oily rag budget. She's tight margins down there, and they continue to turn what you would, Graham, describe as the discards into wallabies, and they do that at both the male and the female level, and it's quite an amazing organisation with a wonderful culture.
I was going to say that, like, it appears that there's been many coaches with different philosophies, but the Brumbies have still remained, as you say, the most successful team. Is that obviously you're sort of out of that now, but you probably closely follow the Brumbies. Is that passed on to the next generation?
Yes, it is, and the first 2 years they stayed at a place in Kingston, and it was colloquially known as Melrose Place. And again, those strengths of the bonds of living together and living in close proximity, go and have coffees and lunches and that together, that just created a real culture. The athletes that go to Canberra now move there permanently and are part of the community. They get dished out to each of the clubs in the ACT competition, and they got contractual obligations to spend time there. But that connection with the past, Stevie Larkham and I was speaking only a couple of weeks ago, it's really something that Canberra is trying to maintain, because rugby was played in Canberra before 1996. The ACT Kookaburras finished, and then the Brumbies started. Obviously different names and different group of people, but the connection is still very strong in the community.
So when did you finish up playing rugby, and how did you end up here in Queensland?
I finished up in 1998. I was playing for the university club here whilst I was a major out at Gallipoli Barracks at Enoggera, and worked out being a full-time soldier and playing football at 33 was hard work. So I decided to give it up, and I'd done some coaching with Army and Services, and then did some coaching at university. Took over the Colts in 99 and 2000, and I've been involved with that club ever since, and I continue to be involved with Army and Services Rugby, and obviously this wonderful event here, C2K, where ex-players have donated their time to help contribute to the game, and coaching's become something of what you do, and it's giving back to the game that was very good to you.
So you basically just transitioned straight from player to coach?
Yes, I did, and done some coaching courses, done some refereeing courses, and it's a natural progression for people to want to give back to the game, to stay connected, to be part of that rugby community, and I've never left it. I love it.
Yeah. So you're obviously a front rower, and your passion is the set piece, particularly the scrum. Let's talk about the scrum a bit. The Australian scrum for quite a while has been maligned as sort of one of our Achilles heels. It's our weak point. You've had some national coaches describe the scrum as just nothing more than a way to restart play. But I think more and more coaches are realising, especially at international level, if you don't have a scrum, you're basically dead in the water. Michael Checker was quoted as saying, Australians have got to learn to love the scrum. What are your thoughts on the state of the scrum in Australia?
It's improving, but you're right, there's been a bit of a delta between where we used to be really good at it, and we had periods of being not so good at it, and unfortunately we copped a bit of a pizzling in the 07 World Cup, and we've slowly but surely recovered, but I still don't think we're there. Safety is paramount at school and junior level, and I think that will always be the determiner of how we manage the game. But I think we've allowed people to not practice the skill of scrummaging and go to uncontested scrums, and the game has been poorer for it. We're slowly but surely turning that around with C2K and my own business on the side. But the French have this saying, no scrum, no ball, no game, and the highest paid bloke in French rugby, it's a joke, but is the tight head prop, and the second highest paid is the reserve tight head prop, because if they don't win the scrum, they don't play rugby. And we're starting to learn that with a lot more coaches and players spending time in Europe. And the Europeans and the UK, they live for the scrum, and we've just got to get better at it and practice. Practice.
So at schoolboy level, junior rugby, like junior club rugby level, you can only push the scrum 1.5 metres. So really, young front rowers aren't being taught resilience, staying in the fight. That's something we can't change. So how does, the likes of yourself and the other coaches here at C2K, how do the front row coaches teach these young boys and girls coming through how to scrummage properly?
Yeah, and the laws of the game aren't just thought up by a group of fuddy-duddies sitting in a room. There's a lot of historical evidence. A lot of the laws are derived from historical cases in law, or review of medical statistics and injury data and that sort of stuff. So, the 1.5 metres at schoolboy level is designed, or under 19s is designed to keep things relatively in check. However, it's that transition from schoolboy or juniors into seniors where a lot of them come up against people who are a bit older, stronger, wiser, and they get put into very uncompromised positions, and that's easy just to go uncontested, we haven't got any more props, and that's not doing our game a full service, and coaches and teams are winning as a result of the uncontested scrums, and the game changes immeasurably when the intent of the laws aren't being followed to the letter of the law. And yes, coaches are allowed to do that, but I think as we display to parents and coaches and athletes here at C2K is, the scrum machine is only one part of the puzzle. There's a lot of technique, body shape and drills that you can do without a scrum machine, and unfortunately coaches might only have 2 40-50-minute sessions a week, and they don't put time in for the set piece. And unfortunately when you get to grade, the kid who might have played second 15 or third 15 because he was a bit heavier or didn't meet the beep test or the Bronco test standard, all of a sudden he's the most loved person at Colts because he's a tight head prop who can hold the scrum up. He doesn't understand why he hasn't been shown any love for 2 years in senior school, and all of a sudden he's the bloke that everyone wants to love down at Clubland. So we've got a long way to go, Graham, but there's a group of people who are working hard to make sure that happens. But again, as parents, as professionals, we've all got a duty of care, and safety must be paramount in what we do. So it's a fine line.
So when you have a group of young front rowers, especially the younger ones, the 14, 15-year-olds, what's your focus on? First of all, technical focus, but also your messaging to those kids.
Yeah, the technical focus is we don't call it a scrum drill. We call it a ground drill, and we say to them, this is not just for front row or the scrum, this is for everybody, because it's applicable at the tackle or the jack or the clean out, the line out and the scrum, and it's about protecting their heads from concussion, it's protecting their shoulders from injuries, engaging their core. So getting that technique piece right and practicing it under stress and load, where they're breathing and maintaining the shape, and then applying a little bit more pressure as things go along. I think that's the foundation of what we're trying to do, and then we get into correcting poor body shape and putting their heads in the right location, and then putting people in behind them. And we've done some drills this morning, where it's 1v1, 2v1, 3v2, 3v3, 4v3, 4v4, all without being on a scrum machine, and working with the coaches and getting them to tap kids on the back and get them into right shape, and it's just a strong messaging. And to all the coaches out there, the scrum machine should be the last thing you use to get your timing and your coordination piece right. All the lead-up points can be done off the scrum machine. And again, we say to the athletes who come to these sessions and other sessions we run that there's some rugby homework to do, and you don't just do this on one Saturday once and then think you've ticked that box and you don't have to do it again. You've got to do that over and over and over again. And we talk about repetition, and I think the messaging's getting there, and there's a good core of kids coming through. But unfortunately, the kid at 14, he might have a growth spurt, and he might lose a little bit of that size and shape as he. So not everyone who's in that right body shape at 14 will end up in the front row, or conversely, the lifters in the junior ages are generally the taller and heavier kids because they can't be lifted. Then all of a sudden, at some point in that timeline, they become the jumper because the bigger kids can start lifting them. So there's a whole heap of dynamics around where these kids will end up, but we don't want to pigeonhole them at a certain age because they all mature at different shapes and sizes and timing. So,
yeah. Do you think there's still that kind of tendency to, pick the big ball running front rower at 18, 19, who may not be the best scrummager, but coach likes him because he makes yards?
Sadly, yes, Graham, and we've the laws of the game can and do at times allow for that person to be subbed on and off. And again, I still don't think we're doing ourselves any favours. Yes, the individual's a strong ball runner and doing all those things, but first and foremost, his job is to pack the scrum and to lifting the line out, and those other things should be complementary to that. But unfortunately, they become the reason why an individual's selected, sadly. And but we're getting there. Yeah, it's changing.
So you've also got your own coaching consultancy business, Engage Mudang Specialty Set Piece. I think I've got that right. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Graham, thanks to good people like yourself and your son Jonah, who has been a fine contributor through the C2K program, a lot of parents said to me that they don't do enough of this stuff in their clubs and their schools, and so I set up a little business on the side, Engage Mudang, and it's a nickname I had when I played at the Kookaburras and the Brumbies, and it's the Engage as part of the scrum sequence, and just created that little name. And I go out to schools and clubs and individuals and offer a service. A president of a club or a principal of a school, they've all got this wonderful 3-word thing called duty of care that they have to honour under the legislation these days. And if they don't have subject matter experts in their organisations to do it, they're engaging people like myself to do that. And it comes at a small cost, but it's better than sitting in a dock listening to a magistrate or, God forbid, a coroner for something going horribly wrong. And, I'm at an age now where I'm still working, but I'd like to retire in the not-too-distant future, and not just retire, but retire to a passion. And I think the game needs it, and there's certainly an opportunity to make a few dollars, but also to give back to the game and ensure that the next generation of forwards and athletes are coming through the system.
So tell us about some of the success stories you've had through your consultancy. I know you've worked with a lot of clubs, men, women, schools, clubs, rep teams. Tell us about some of those that you've been proud of.
Yeah, a couple there. One was I've spent a lot of time at Downlands. Garrick Morgan, ex-Wallaby and Reds, got me into...
and South's coach.
He's now coaching South, that's correct. Great plug for the Magpies. Hello, Garrick. And Downlands play in the GPS competition against the Buy. They're not in the GPS, and they're a traditional rugby school, but they just don't have the numbers and the people there to do it. So we worked very hard over the last 5 or 6 years in just creating a culture there. And I went back there a couple of weeks ago, and I said to the coach, this is the best group I've ever seen, because finally the gap between the firsts and the seconds has been narrowed. And that means that the program started years ago is actually starting to take effect, and that kids are coming through the program. They have to recruit wisely, and they go to the country for that. They put on a really good education and mission experience for the kids, and rugby is just something they do. It's not everything they do up there. And then the second story was another Toowoomba club, the Bears. They played in the Risdon Cup up there, and Zane Mitchell, brother of Drew, Army warrant officer, was coaching. He said, "Mate, can you come up and help me? I've got this gun backline, we can't win the ball." And I said, listen, I'll come up and do a session. We did a session, and they won the next 8 weeks straight. And I said, if you make the grand final, I'll come up and I'll just do a rehash session. And I turned up, and the hooker, who was a leaguey, lovely kid, I watched him, and he wasn't happy with the setup, and he turned around and gave the second row an absolute berating, and I said, I don't know why I'm here, this kid seems, and they beat Rangers in the grand final off the back of a dominant scrum and line out, and again, the moral of the story there is, if you don't practice a skill, you don't get better at it, and you can't just submit in a first grade grand final to uncontested scrums, because the laws at that level don't allow you to do it. But they invested for a small fee. They got a huge return on investment. Dalby and Gundawindi would say it wasn't really the Risdon Cup because it was COVID era and they didn't play in the comp that year, but the Bears beat Rangers in the final, so there's a good news story. And there's individual kids, your young bloke Jonah, who's been a wonderful exponent of what we're trying to teach and taking on, and there's countless others who use the opportunity to better themselves, and if they make it in the game, they make it. If not, they stay in the game and they're better people as a result of it. So the game hopefully will be thankful for what myself and others are doing to keep that skill set alive and well and practice, so that people can do it at club without fear of injuring people, and parents, mothers in particular, know that little Johnny's going to play in the front row and everything's safe. So
yeah. Nearly done. You're also involved on the board of Queensland Country Rugby. And just tell us about that. And I suppose the focus, has always been on Brisbane, Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast. So how do we identify talent and make sure there's a pathway and they don't get gobbled up by other codes?
Yeah, it's a good question, because Queensland Country organisation has been around since 1902. It effectively got kicked off again in 1964. Rugby died after World War II, and it took a lot of time over a lot of years to get it back into the regional areas. Obviously, varsity rugby and services rugby took it to different points of the compass around Queensland, but the code is alive and well with strong competitions in Cairns, Townsville, used to be out in Mount Isa, Western Queensland, Mackay, Rockhampton, Central Highlands, Wide Bay, as you said, Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast, and it's the Queensland Reds, not the Ballymore Reds or the Brisbane Reds or the South East Queensland Reds. It's the Queensland Reds, and the amount of talent that comes out of the country, men's and women, boys and girls, is extraordinary. And what we're doing at Country is putting on a pathway for people in the country to have a genuine representative pathway, but also we're trying to make it give the parents and the athletes a rugby experience, and that's something the other codes can't give. And educating our athletes and coaches in particular that there's opportunities all around the world to play. When you're studying, you turn up at a rugby club anywhere in the world, and all of a sudden you've got 30 mates, and that's better than being by yourself floundering when you're studying or working in foreign ports. So rugby's it's alive and well in the country, and we think we're doing the right thing to offer opportunities for young men and women and boys and girls to play. We've had some massive success stories, particularly with our women's program in recent years. 4 years ago, we started what we call the Orchids, the women's team, with essentially uncontested scrums. And in 4 years, we've now had 6 Super W Reds players, 1 Brumby, one lady represented Wales overnight. We've had 2 for Samoa and an Australian Sevens player. So that, and the Queensland Rugby Union say to me, "Where do you keep finding these kids?" I said, "There's hundreds of them out there. You've got to attract them to the game, develop them, and then retain them, and hopefully they don't go to the other codes. And we offer those wonderful experiences that rugby's renowned for."
So, is there a decent alignment between country rugby and the QRU in terms of you guys communicate? You might identify some talent. You might say, "Hey, this person should be brought into the academy system." Do they listen to you?
Yeah, they do, and obviously Queensland's a big block of dirt, and the tyranny of distance is one thing, but we've made strong representation to the high performance and the academy programs here, and said that geography and cost should not be an issue for a kid to be boy or girl, man or woman, to be selected in teams. And it's easy to treat the traditional nurseries in southeast Queensland, or to bring somebody in from the Downs or Sunny or Gold Coast to play, but there's talent all through the state, and we've got alignment, and it's not perfect, but we're certainly I don't live in the country, I live here in Brisbane, but being on the board here, I can come and speak to the CEO, the CFO, head of community rugby, head of high performance, and put our case forward, and we've had some outstanding athletes come through the men's and women's and boys and girls program in recent years, and we continue to provide players to the traditional boys GPS, AIC, TIS schools competitions, premier grade men's and women's and Colts. A lot of kids leave the country to come to Brisbane for university. Some finish their tertiary qualifications and never go home. Others go straight home. So again, going back to the country, we've got to provide pathways for those people who are in the country, and it's lovely to give back and to offer those opportunities to coaches, managers, administrators and players, medics. It's fantastic.
Let's finish off with a couple more scrum questions. Is the scrum safe?
Safe as it's ever been, and to a point where, if an athlete, there's certainly things that you have to do physically to prepare yourself for it, but in my humble opinion and that of the lawmakers, it's as safe as it's ever been. There's still a bit of work to do around what happens when the scrum collapses, and to ensure that the ball is in play. We're not repacking scrums every second of the day. People in the stands like this don't particularly want to be watching scrums repack all day, so they've got to get that part of the game right, but never been safer. And it's very much controlled with the referees calling of the engagement. In the old days, we were 1.5 metres apart and launched into each other, and they were different times for different people, I'm sure, but it's safer than it's ever been, Graham.
And do you think that the scrum is safe in terms of it's not going to be watered down, it's still going to be seen as a core part of the battle for the contest?
Yeah, and that would be one of our key points of difference to rugby league, is that we have a genuine contest at a restart. So whether it's a line out, a scrum, or kick-off, there's a genuine contest, and the scrum is one of our real points of difference. And the other thing is, it's written in the laws of the game that rugby is a sport for all body shapes, and the somatotypes, whether mesomorph, endomorph, ectomorph, we can cater for them all, and we've got tall second rowers, we've got more chunkier front rowers, very athletic, muscly back rowers, fast wingers and skillful backs. Our game caters for all shapes and sizes. So yes, the scrum will continue to be at the forefront of how we deliver the ball to the backs, and I don't think they're going to do too much tinkering with it, because the European clubs and unions are very strong at it.
State of the code in this country, we tend to be a little bit negative here because of how the Wallabies have gone, the World Cup, and how we sort of tend to compare ourselves with the richer codes. Rugby's a worldwide code, and it's massive worldwide. So what are your thoughts on the state of the code in the country, and should we be optimistic?
I think we should be very optimistic. Yes, it's done it tough, and rugby is alive and well. I've been to Townsville and Rockhampton the last couple of weeks doing some combines, or similar position-specific stuff like we're doing here at C2K in North Queensland and Central Queensland, and the amount of people that jumped on board for those says that rugby is alive. It is well. It's unwell in the financial stakes because the bigger codes are killing us, with money and opportunities for players. But we're a global sport, unlike league. We've got competitions in all parts of the world. We've got opportunities. I think our failure at the 2023 World Cup has exposed some serious flaws in our pathways and our programs, and I think if we'd kept putting band-aids on top of the band-aids, we weren't going to. So Eddie Jones, in my humble opinion, has done us a favour, and I think if we don't learn from that and apply lessons learned, we're going to be poorer. But I think Phil Waugh and Daniel Herbert are saying all the right things at the moment. And as you said, unfortunately, rugby in this country is determined by how well the Wallabies are going. And we didn't go so well at the World Cup, but I think the game is alive and well, and there's a lot of people working hard to make sure it stays relevant.
Cheers, Murray. Look, appreciate your time. Best of luck with your coaching consultancy business, and keep up the good work with the young front rowers.
Thank you very much, Graham, and engage Mudang, Facebook and Instagram. Thank you.
Fantastic. I'll put those links up on the video.